Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Take 2, we're going to call it, on what will be the IndyCar Weekly here on GlacierTV. Well, Vincent, alongside Matt Cooke, Dave Judson, and Randall Chenworth, what will be a weekly series here, discussing everything that happens in the iRacing.com IndyCar Series, as well as what happens in other series, and also IndyCar in real life as well. Dave, I'm going to come to you first of all. We've had a pretty crazy season so far in the Iceland IndyCar Series. This week we're at Ring Motegi, and things are very, very interesting.
Yeah, well, the season's winding down. We've got a couple weeks left, and the pressure is definitely on for the championship. Andre Castro's leading the points right now, but Lambertson and Tim Doyle and John Goke are hot on their heels. And you kind of tell by the way John was racing last week at Ring Motegi that he was really gunning for every position he could get, and the pressure really seems to be on him right now. But back and forth season, I mean, no one guy has really been taking control of the series like usually happens.
And Matt, I'm going to bring you into the conversation right away as well. The championship arguably has never been as close as this. We've had drivers in both the Open Series and the Fixed Series doing battle, and it's going to go all the way down to the wire. We right now on week 9 of 12. We have 3 races left to go, and anyone can still win both the Open and the Fixed Championships.
Yeah, well, the points are really close together, and a lot of drivers are going to be looking to knock out their worst week right now, and or just even prevent other drivers from gaining more points on top of their already the lead that they might have already had.
However, Dave, you've alluded to it already. The Fixed Series especially, this past week really did see a big momentum shift with one of the championship contenders, Jonathan Goke, out very early on in the race with an incident with Young O, putting him out, and that really is going to change the complexion of the championship in this last 3 rounds.
Yeah, John hasn't run every single week. He has 8 weeks in, but he hasn't run all of them so far. So he's kind of got a goose egg that it's really hard for him to make up, and he's just racing really hard. And some argue that it may have been crossing the line. Others say that's just the series. Yeah, he's racing very hard, and even though he's 180 points out, one drop week could bounce him right back up to where he's only 10-15 points out. So by no means is he out of the championship.
So plenty to talk about in this, the first of the iRacing.com IndyCar Weekly. So Vincent, along with Dave Judson, our special guest for this evening, and Matt Cooke, and also Randall Chenworth. Now, let's start by talking about this racetrack, Twin Ring Motegi. Arguably one of the most difficult tracks that IndyCar goes to. It's also the track that Danica Patrick won her first ever race at. And Matt, when you consider the fact that Danica Patrick has only ever won 1 race in IndyCar, she won it at arguably one of the most difficult tracks that you can go to.
Well, it's really good that she won her first race there. That's showing that she actually has the skill to race any track, no matter which type it is. Hopefully she can carry that through and continue to get some wins. And
Dave, we've raced here now for 4 days, both in the Open Series and the Fixed Series. This track really has tested drivers. In the Fixed Series, you have that fact that in turn 3, you're not necessarily just lifting. In some cases, you're actually using the brake just a little bit to get that car to turn into turn number 3 and 4. In the Open Series, a little bit different, but a lot of setup compromise has to go into play if you're going to make that car work throughout a full run.
Absolutely will. Since both ends of the track are drastically different from each other, you're not going to be able to make a setup that runs a flat out 1 and 2 the same as a third gear of 3 and 4 having to brake. So I always thought that having a better 3 and 4 setup, I could come out of 1 or out of 4 and get ahead of guys and try to carry the momentum through 1 and 2. You can make most of your passes in 3 and 4 if you can, say, outbrake a guy, or if you can dive in that corner a little better. So yeah, definitely a compromise, and leaves a lot of guys scratching their heads when it comes to setups.
And actually, Matt, let's talk about this racetrack a little bit. Of course, you do a lot of work for the iRacing IndyCar community, having a look at these tracks. Let's start with turn 1 and 2 at Twin Ring Motegi. And the important thing to realise is that on that inside line, on the apex of turn 1 and 2, there's that horrible bump. And especially in the fixed series, that can really cause the car to snap loose a little bit, losing a lot of momentum.
You hit the nail right on the head, Will. That bump can do very strange things to your car. It can either do nothing or it can bounce you way out towards the wall. You're going to lose a lot of time if you end up catching it in the wrong way. And in general, your wheel is just going to shake a little bit while you're actually going over that bump.
And then, of course, so after you get yourself through turns number 1 and 2, you've got that little straightaway before you come on to 3 and 4. And it's always the best place to make an overtaking manoeuvre down that inside line. However, in the fixed series, especially, it's really difficult to keep that inside line going and also get good momentum off the corner. We'll talk about the strength of field race that happened. We saw it on GlacierTV on Monday night into Tuesday morning. And it really does show, especially in the fixed, that you have to be very careful not only how you get off the gas, but get back on the gas as well.
Yeah, very much so. If you end up getting on the accelerator too early, your car is going to end up pushing up and going into the wall. If you're too late, you're going to lose a lot of your momentum that you could have had, which would have put you in a great position for a pass. Not to mention, you also have to realize that there's other drivers in front of you and behind you, and each one is going to be taking a slightly different line or even a slightly different lifting point or braking point, which is going to completely change how you have to take the corner every single time.
And Dave, I'll bring you back into the conversation here. Of course, the fixed is one thing. Open, a slightly different thing as well. And with the open, you've got, of course, the 2 sets of corners, but you also have pit road as well. Getting onto pit road at Motegi is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, well, that even incredibly difficult doesn't always describe how hard it can be to get on there, because when you're coming out of 4, your car wants to just go out towards that outside wall and down the track, and trying to cut it into the pits where the pit wall really will sneak up on you. It's like all of a sudden it just appears and it catches a lot of guys out, or you hit those, the end of the wall, or you scrape your side pod against it, and that can ruin your race. But there's so much time to be gained. If you can really hit your stop, you can gain 3-4 seconds on your competitor, break that draft, and if you got a good enough setup, you can just drive away. So it's really a matter of how hard do you really want to push it.
And of course, not only is pit entry important, but always pit exit is always important as well. One of the things of Motegi is, like, because of the fact the track isn't really like banked, you have the chance to come onto the racetrack a little bit early if there's no traffic, but also, really, you don't lose that much just by running the apron on the outlap as well, because, you've got not that much banking on the banking or turn 1 and 2 in the first place. The track itself, the banking itself and the pit road even, that's not that severe, so therefore you can actually run the inside line, Dave, all the way round without really losing too much time, which is a big difference compared to when you go to tracks like Texas, Charlotte, Atlanta, so on and so forth.
Yeah, Motegi is a good place to, you can run the bottom, and especially if you got guys coming on your outside, on your pit exit, you're not going to have to worry about losing a ton of time like you would, like you said, Texas, where it feels like the apron is on glass and it has no banking at all. So, yeah, there's time that you can gain just being conservative, just staying on the bottom and staying out of the way.
And let's talk a little bit about the strength of field race. We'll start with the fixed series race that went on this previous Monday. And Matt, of course, you were in that race. You got yourself a 3rd place finish, losing out in the end to Tim Dahl and one other driver, coming home in the 3rd position. That was a tough old race. It looks as though you might have got yourself a tiny bit of wing damage at the start of the race, but you're able to soldier on.
I didn't actually end up getting any wing damage. The difference that happened there was Tim had a slightly wider entry to the turn, causing me to slow down considerably to avoid running into the back of him with my shallower entry. That unfortunately did heat my tires a little bit for the next few laps. It felt kind of odd, and in general, I just broke the momentum that I had.
And that race itself, I mean, you didn't have that many cautions, actually, when you think about it, from Motegi. Everyone came into that race thinking, oh, the entire race is going to be like a Pocono race. You'll go to green, then you go back to caution. It'll be all the time spent under caution. But with that few cautions, really, it was good racing up and down the field.
Oh, there was definitely amazing racing going on. You noticed how some of the cars broke away into small packs, generally either due to incidents that were happening, passes, or anything like that. But it is a track that you can break away from other drivers if you can keep a steady line going. In general, it actually offers amazing racing overall, because you really have to get your momentum coming out of 3 and 4, and that's going to determine your entire lap that you're on plus your next lap. So it's really interesting to see how drivers cope with the crowd around them.
And of course, Tim Doyle won that race. It was Andre Castro in second, Matt Cooke who came home in third. You then move over to the Open Series, and it looks as though that Team Nap Racing, with Young O and Tim Doyle especially, are just dominating here at Motegi. Young O won the Open race, Tim Doyle second, Matt Cooke in third, and Martin Miller came home in the 4th position with Brad Sanford in the 5th spot. But the important thing to note there was, first of all, only 2 cautions, Dave, and secondly, only 6 cars finished on the lead lap.
Yeah, that just goes to show you the incredible pace of Young O and Tim Doyle, teammates on Nap Racing. They lap guys in a hurry, and even when you look at the standings, 7th place was 2 laps down. So those guys were incredibly fast, and you know that guys are quick when guys like Matt Cooke finish 3.5 seconds behind the winner. You know, he's always right there, and he finished, you know, where he did.
And you have a look at the pit stops as well, is that, you know, Young O pitted on lap number 12 of the race. He didn't pit again until much later in the race, lap number, I'm just coming up on my screen, number 69. So he ran a full fuel stint there, pretty much, on that car, under green. And I think that's where he picked up the majority of that time. But 2 laps is an enormous amount, but it also kind of, in some ways, plays by your theory in which pit entry and pit exit is so important at Motegi.
It's also important too if you catch an early caution. Some guys will split their strategy. Some guys go in and top off just to get the 2-3 gallons. But that you get 2-3 gallons and you get a long green flag run, you get green flag pit stops. You nail your stop, you're in your pit box 2-3 seconds less than some of your competitors. You've gained, you know, half a straightaway on a guy just in the pits.
And Matt, we talk about how, you know, Danica Patrick won her only race in IndyCar at Motegi on what was essentially a fuel mileage race against Helio Castroneves back in 2008. In some ways, the IndyCar Series race here on iRacing does exactly the same thing, because you get an early caution, you want to come onto pit road early, and then hope that something happens while these drivers try and come onto pit road. You can stay out, the caution comes out, you can pit, you come back out, and all of a sudden things are all great for you. So a lot of strategy does come into play here at Motegi.
Without a doubt. It is a track that requires a lot of pre-planning. In general, you can change up your strategy midway through the run, and it's not going to hurt you all that much. Yang had an amazing pit stop, so did Tim Doyle during that race. In general, most of the field pitted early during that race, figuring, you know what, it's time to top off, let's get that extra mileage in there. But some of the people decided, you know, I'm going to stay out, I'm going to get the positions now, and hopefully I can break away from the rest of the field and have that extra time to lean on.
And Dave, that's the important point as well. You've got to use strategy here at Motegi. We saw Tim Doyle, Young O, that's the way they run the race as well. Matt Cooke finishing in 3rd position, Martin Miller 4th, Brad Sanford 5th, and Jonathan Goke running out. The only 6 guys that finished on the lead lap. we still got one soft race left to go on Sunday afternoon. Do you think some of these guys will be looking at what happened in Monday night's race to see exactly what happened and try and translate that into their race strategy come Sunday?
Absolutely. I think you'd be foolish to not see previous races and see how the strategy kind of out. But like Matt said, strategy can change on the fly, and a lot of times once you get into the race, you're just focusing on the there and the now. So it's good to have in the back of your mind. Maybe you'll put something pop in your head if a caution comes up. Like, hey, I might only be 5 laps away from making it to the end, but you catch a couple cautions, all of a sudden you're in your fuel window. So a lot of things could change. Sometimes my brain hurts after racing here.
And then to look at the championship standings with 3 races to go, in the Open Series, it's Randy Crosno in Division 2 leading the way from Matt Cooke and then Gorgon Ejox. And Division 2 arguably has been one of the most toughest divisions to try and win a championship in the last couple of seasons. You have a look at the overall championship, however, and it's still Randy Crosno from Matt Cooke and then Matt Lambertson running in that 3rd position right now. But Lambertson, right now, Dave, is 100 points exactly behind Randy Crosno. Both drivers have 8 weeks to complete, so Lambertson is going to have a lot of work to do in the remaining races if he's going to have any chance of closing that 100-point gap, remembering that he's got to take drop weeks into account.
Yeah, Matt basically needs to finish ahead of Randy by several positions the next 3 weeks and hope that he's got a really low drop number that gets kicked out. And Randy's been pretty consistent this season, so if he doesn't have a real low number that gets kicked out for a drop week, he may only gain, so he could win a race and only gain like 5 points over his total, but Matt could finish second and kick out a really low week and gain 50 on him. So it really all comes down to, the 0 hour on the end of week 12 to see who's really going to come out on top.
And Matt, right now, you're actually battling not only against your teammate, but essentially your team manager in Randy Crosno for Aero X Racing. Of course, you joined the team in the last week or so, but are you going to try and battle your own teammate, your own team leader for the championship? Is it going to be the sort of thing that you're going to do in the last 3 weeks of the season, remembering that you're only really about 40 points behind in the championship standings?
I definitely want to give him a run for his money on this one. As much as we're teammates, there's no reason not to race each other, and we both have that agreement. Overall, he is a consistent runner. He's had a few unfortunate incidents recently, but I believe that in the upcoming weeks, he could end up getting rid of one of his lower weeks.
I'm pretty sure if I know Randy well enough, if you don't race him, he'll kick you.
I think he would,
Very
actually.
much so.
That's the thing with Randy Crosno. I mean, he's come out of age the last couple of seasons, especially being the team manager for Aero X Racing. You have a look at the Oval season, for example, the Oval Fixed season, and it's a completely different story. Andre Castro, who came home, second in the race at Motegi, leads the championship right now with 1,493 points. Compare that to Matt Lambertson's 1,417 points. Tim Doyle currently running in the 3rd position, Jonathan Cooke in 4th, and then Troy Eddy rounding out your top 5. And as far as I'm concerned, Matt, the important thing is that the old stalwarts of Tim Doyle, Young O, and even yourself, they're not really leading the championship charge right now. It's someone who, arguably, a lot of these drivers haven't really heard much about.
Oh, that's completely true. Just because you have a history of being in the top standings doesn't mean that you're going to remain there. There's always going to be another driver out there that is going to be able to race you harder, and you got to hand it to Andre Castro. In this case, he's running very clean, very consistent overall. He did have a run-in with Dave at Iowa, but that could arguably be just hard racing.
I'm going to choose not to comment on that, Matt.
I understand that, Dave. He's definitely making a name for himself in the fixed series, without a doubt. It would be interesting to see him run the Open. And if we look at Troy Eddy is qualifying very well overall throughout the fixed series. He doesn't do as well in the SOF races. Generally, he's starting a little further back. But I mean, overall, he is definitely in a position where he could end up fighting for the lead.
I mean, the only other drivers really in the top 10 who you can have a look at are Dano Brookins. He's currently sat in the 7th position, but he'd need an absolute miracle to win the championship right now. And then you've got people like Adam Dock and Brian Tong sat in 9th and 10th positions. Also, Jeff York in 8th, a very accomplished fixed series racer. These guys, you know, they're kind of out of the battle for this season, but still, there's a lot that goes on in iRacing from a season-to-season basis, and that fixed series really does make a huge impact on what people think about other drivers.
Oh, without a doubt, it carries through overall to every series that you're going to run. Once you get a name for yourself, it's going to stick. There's a few particular drivers that I'm sure we could all think of that, you know, generally you have an opinion on them, even though you haven't even raced them recently or at all. And
Dave will turn our attention now to the IZOD IndyCar Road Series, and right now they're running at Barber Motorsports Park. And you drove Barber back in the ISOWC race a little bit early on this year, also drove it in the 16th Street Racing League. That track is really difficult. I mean, it's very easy to make a pass, but at the same time, it's also very easy to put that car right into one of the barriers.
Absolutely, Will. I find that Barber is one of the most difficult tracks for me to get a rhythm on, whether it be the IndyCar, Daytona Prototype, anything that I've raced there. If you're a guy that's really smooth and consistent, just you basically just let the guys in front of you drive off the track. You don't even have to try to make passes sometimes, because that track just lures you into, hey, take this corner a little harder, take this one a little harder, and you hit a curb or you clip the grass or something, and you're flying off the track, and your competition drives off and looks at you like, hey, that was easy. So yeah, Barber's very difficult track, and fun as hell to race on, but man, it can really bite you sometimes, which makes winning there just that much sweeter if you can conquer it.
And that's, if you have a look at the championship standings over there, it really is like a who's who of road racing in the IZOD IndyCar Series. But roadside, especially in the top 4 positions, you've got Nico Brandt leading the way. Of course, he's one of the most accomplished drivers on the IndyCar Series on the roadside. He does the setup sessions every Monday evening, about 8 o'clock GMT, if you'd like to check them out. Also, Dennis Garees driving for Vortex Racing in the 2nd position. Jussi Nieminen, Nico Brandt's teammate, in 3rd, and Andreas Warner in the 4th position. And then you go to 5th place. You actually have Shark Racing Simon Garma, who normally races GT cars, has made that transition now over to open wheel racing in that Shark Racing Club UK and iRacing, running in 5th position in the standings. But you look at these top 3 positions, Matt, and all of a sudden, Brandt, Garees, and Newman, they're the first 3 people you think about when you think about road racing in IndyCar.
Without a doubt, they're very consistent drivers. I've met a few of them on the oval side of things. They're all really, I mean, they have big names overall. I mean, anyone should know Dennis Garees by now. He's pretty much everywhere, very consistent driver, very friendly driver, and I'm really looking forward to them battling it out over the next couple of weeks.
Well, I just have to point out Nico Brandt's stats for this season are beyond impressive. He's made 10 starts, 10 wins, 10 poles, and he's only had 4 incident points in 10 races. That is incredible, especially on the road where it's so easy to drop a wheel off and get an incident point. That in itself deserves some sort of special award there.
I mean, only 4 incident points, as you say there, for Nico Brandt really does deserve a special mention, because on the road side, I mean, especially when you come to tracks like Barber, you see it also at other tracks along the season. It's very easy to try and take these little shortcuts. You're going to get yourself what we in iRacing call the 1X, get yourself a 2 wheels off the racing surface, go onto the grass, and it's a faster way around the racetrack. But Nico Brandt has done his job, and he's done his job properly. you have a look at the fixed series. Dennis Grease leading away from James Andrew for Club UK&I. Even Sol in the 3rd position for Club Iberia. And then also Dan Glang there in the 4th position for Club Australia New Zealand. And then Richie Heatherton there in the 5th position for Club UK and Ireland as well. And Dave, you race a lot against Dennis Grease in the ISOWC. And you've always said to me that you can only make the points up really on oval, because you know that Grease on the road courses is always going to be dominant against you. And the fixed series especially really does show that.
Yeah, fixed series really shows you where the driver talent is. Everyone's got the same set. Everybody, in theory, is equal. But driver skill, knowledge of tracks, knowledge of what the car is going to do throughout a run, that's where it really shines through, especially on the road. And as long as these fixed races have been this season, sometimes longer races kind of lure you into getting comfortable and you might make a mistake. So you got to be really mentally tough. And in his 67 starts, he's won 39 races this season. That is very impressive. And every time I've ever raced Dennis in the ISOWC, if I can make a successful pass on him, I really feel accomplished, because he's the guy to beat every week on the road.
Let's move on a little bit, and let's talk about what's coming up next. In the Oval Series, it's Pocono. And for the Pocono race, you're going to have a lot of things coming into play here, Matt, because you've got people thinking about the Pocono 400. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But also, you have people wanting to make their mark at one of the most difficult racetracks in all of iRacing, the good old Tricky Triangle.
Oh, without a doubt, Pocono is definitely a driver skill track. You got 3 different turns that are modeled after, 3 different turns on different tracks. And the track is extremely bumpy, which can make it kind of difficult to set up a car that's going to run consistent on.
And you talk about those 3 different corners. Turn number 1, we'll start there. It really is a fast corner, but you can't get that car out of line at all. It really does require a late apex to get into the corner.
Yes, it does, Will. If you take an early apex, there's no doubt in my mind that your car will most likely end up sliding up into the wall, or you will have to slow down significantly in order to hold that line. By taking a late apex, 3 different turns, they're going to come out on a much better spot on the track and hold a lot more speed through the corner.
That's why Matt. Sorry, Matt.
No, that's okay, Dave.
I was going to say that makes passing turn 1 really difficult, because take that early turn in and you're risking running over the curb and pushing up into the guy on the outside of you. So yeah, taking the inside line, you're really taking your race into your own hands down there.
Of course, Pocono is banked at 14 degrees. Then you come into turn 2, 8 degrees of banking there. Many people compare that to the tunnel turn at Indianapolis, Matt. And it's a track that no one really worries that much about, but the corner, which is important, turn 3, 6 degrees of banking. It is very, very flat. And you've got to get yourself a good run for the entire corner, all the way from turn entry, all the way through to corner exit, because you need that momentum onto the start-finish straight.
Yes, you do. The car can easily slide out there. You have to have a setup that is going to be able to hang on to that corner, have enough downforce so the car is actually going to sit properly. You're also going to have to find your lift point, most likely, for the corner. Getting a car to actually stick in there without a lift is going to be an extremely difficult task. However, it has been done in the past in previous seasons, people have informed me. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was someone out there that tuned their car to actually be able to do that. But it comes with a trade-off. They could be a little bit slower somewhere else on the track.
And that really is the important thing with Pocono. It is always about trade-off. In fact, we're going to bring in someone else here, John Porzuk. And John, Pocono, you've driven it hundreds of laps. And it always is the case. You want to set the car up to work well in turn 1 and turn 3. But finding that balance always is critical.
Yeah, good evening, guys. Before I get on to that, I just wanted to compliment you on the renovations you've done here to the Glacier TV studio. I know the viewers at home can't really see this because you're not doing video, but it's got a nice burnt orange shag carpet in here and one of those 1970s sort of glass coffee tables. It's really classy in here, so props, Will. But Pocono, yeah, it's one of the most unique tracks we go to by far. I personally really struggle with it sometimes. It's one of those places where you've got to get a good rhythm going and have to have the setup tweaked just to your personal preferences. But it generally provides for some good racing when when it can stay green and guys aren't wrecking each other. From a setup standpoint, you're right that you have to focus on which corner you want to be better in, and it's usually either turn 1 or turn 3. And so if you're messing around and trying to deal with the bumps in turn 1, then maybe you get a little bit too tight in turn 3, or you could do the opposite and try to set the car up for turn 3 and really get a good run down that front straightaway. So a lot of different approaches you can take to get to the same end point, really.
But John, you've run a 400-mile race already this year at Pocono. In fact, Dave, you've done so as well. I'll talk to you first, Dave. And you were right up against Jonathan Goke in the ISOWC Spring Pocono race. And that race went down to the last couple of laps. And it shows, especially with green flag runs, the field's kind of like spreads itself out. But over the course of the run, it will also close back up. And whilst it is single file racing, it's very, very strategic.
Yeah, a lot of times Pocono comes down to that last pit stop and getting a good exit, trying to stay ahead of the competition, or at least stay within drafting distance. I know in the Spring Pocono race, it was a matter of me staying within the draft, and I was able to reel in John just a little bit lap after lap after lap. But you mess up a corner, even just the slightest bit, and you fall out of the draft. If you're both running about the same speed, you'll never catch back up. So I know those last 15 laps, I was in a different zone. It was just hit every mark, and it was so hard even to gain a half a tenth a lap. But yeah, that Pocono will really test you, and the draft will really mess with you too. And if you don't take that into account, you can really overdrive some of those corners.
Will, I've got a question for you, actually, from one of our listeners. So we all know that Pocono has been added to the real-world schedule for the IndyCar Series this year. We also know that Danica Patrick's no longer in the series. If she was, do you think she would have a chance at winning that race?
That's actually a very interesting question. And I say this because all the years that I watched IndyCar, Danica Patrick was very good on the high-banked ovals. She was good at places also like Kansas, back when it had a moderate degree of banking, and also, of course, at Motegi. Now, you look at Pocono, and I think it depends. I mean, back in the IRL/05 car, perhaps. In the DW12 car, I think not as much, because the way the tyres fall off, a lot more similar to NASCAR, and you see just how much she's struggling right now in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. I think that, 4 or 5 years ago, yes. Right now, probably not.
But in terms of the way the fuel strategy works out and things like that, what do you think at Pocono? Do you think that somebody thinking like that, you were talking about her win at Motegi, do you think that sort of mindset might be successful at that track?
I think it's always going to be important, fuel mileage. On an oval, fuel mileage is one of the first things that the crew chiefs especially always think about. That's why you always see drivers saying, save fuel, from the driver to the crew chief, from the crew chief to the driver. And they're always asking that question, how much fuel do I need to get to the end of the race? And, of course, no grey mark checkered finish in IndyCar racing, so it's always going to finish when that checkered flag comes out the first time. So, I'm not quite sure. Danica, yes, she'll be good at it. In some ways, not so good at others. I think, importantly, however, you've got to have that track position, and I think that's what in the official series, in real life anyway, I think that's where Pocono is going to make it, and that long straightaway. It's actually one of the longest straightaways that the FIA sanction in all of racing. I think that is where you're going to make your tyre up, not by fuel saving.
Yeah, this year, there's probably going to be too much, drafting and speed down that front straightaway to save a ton of fuel, but it's really going to be interesting because they're making some great passes at Indy this season. with the the way the straightaways there are, and Pocono's even longer than that, I believe. So it's really going to be interesting to see how brave somebody might be going into turn one.
And I think at the end of the day, it will all come back down to who has a better run out of turn number 3. But we'll step aside for a moment from Pocono in the official series, and we'll talk about upcoming events coming up. Of course, we have the ISOWC Pocono 400 coming your way on GlacierTV this coming Sunday. We also have the World Tour event coming up on the 13th of July 2013. Start time for that will be 2 o'clock Eastern time, and that 400-mile race, Matt, you've already talked to me about it. It's going to be hellacious.
Without a doubt. I mean, it's a long race, and there's so many areas that you can make a mistake on. Even hitting one of the numerous bumps on the track could end your race in a moment's notice. I mean, drivers are going to have to be on the top of their game. They're really going to have to stay focused and know what they're getting themselves into. It's definitely going to be a driver's track, without a doubt.
And
how many cautions do you think we're going to see in that top split 400-mile race?
Well, I think, that's an interesting point, because, of course, the way iRacing changed the regulations means that it's going to change a little bit. I think 9 cautions? I mean, caution laps, you have to say, Dave, are very long at Pocono.
Yeah, I mean, you could knit a sweater in the amount of time it takes to run a caution laps at Pocono. You said 9 cautions, and I think kind of when we went into the iRacing Indy 500 this year, we kind of thought really close field. Car hasn't been modified a ton, so a lot of guys are pretty close in times, which would lend itself to maybe really close racing. And we had the first 80, 60, something like that, laps straight caution free. So I think Pocono could be the same way. A long green flag run to start the race. And I know that in the 16th Street League, Pocono 400, it opened up with a long green flag run, and the same as the spring ISOWC Pocono race was a long green flag run. So I would expect a long green flag run and maybe a couple cautions near the end as guys really get dicey trying to get position. So I'm going to say less. I'm going to go with 5.
5 for you there, Dave. Unfortunately, we are already running out of time. We'll talk about the Road Series very quickly. They're heading over to VIR this week, and Dave, VIR, it's an impossibly difficult track.
Yeah, I haven't had the privilege of racing it on with the IndyCar, but every time I've tried to tackle it in any series, I usually end up frustrated. It's one of the tracks that still boggles me, and so guys that can tame it this upcoming week in the IndyCar they'll definitely have earned their victory.
So we'll talk to Dave a little bit more next week in the second episode of IndyCar Weekly. Of course, the iRacing Road Series will be running at Virginia International Raceway, starting from that, of course, on Monday night from about 9 Eastern time.
Did we lose Will here?
No, I'm back, of course.
We can carry on without him, right?
No, I'm still here.
I mean,
Shut up!
Really needs him.
Shut up.
Yeah, we'll be better off this way.
He's just here for show.
I am. That's what it is. We also have the Oval Series, as I say, running at Pocono as well. Also, a couple of benefit races coming up on Glacier TV. The first one of them, Randolph, is of course the second of the Morgan Shirley benefit races. That's coming up the day after the Pocono 400, not in IndyCar, in a 4GT around Watkins Glen. It's going to be a long, hard endurance slog for 60 minutes.
Yeah, it's going to be a really exciting race. Ford GT, 80% fuel around Watkins Classic boot. A lot of drafts, a lot of slipping and sliding into those slippery corners, and it should be really fun. Hopefully, we get a great turnout. Great prizes going up.
Indeed, yeah, and iRacing have donated 3 times $100 to gift certificates. We've got $50 from Glacier TV, $50 from ETV. We've got a Derek Spear button box and a couple of graphics skin overlay things. More prizes also to come as well, so keep an eye out on that on the iRacing forums. As I say, we'll have a little bit more of an in-depth chat with Dave Judson next week, as well as John Porzik as well. I've been Will Vincent. This has been IndyCar Weekly Episode 1. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. You can say goodbye, people, you know.
See you, everyone.
See ya.
See you, everybody. Thanks for having me here.
Whiz, for some reason,